The facts are true. The news is fake.
Yeah, that's one of those lines that really, it just stops you, doesn't it?
It does. It sounds like a paradox, a riddle.
Like a Zen koan or something. It feels like it's designed to break your brain just a little bit.
Right. Because my first thought is, well, how can that be?
Right.
If I give you a fact, and that fact is, objectively true, measurable, verifiable, how does the news report that comes out of it become fake?
Exactly. And I think we need to be really clear about what we're not talking about today.
Right.
When people hear fake news now, especially, in the last 5 or 10 years, their mind jumps to something very specific.
Totally. You think of, like, Russian troll farms or those weird websites from Macedonia that were making up stories during an election.
Right. Or, some guy in his basement photoshopping an alien shaking hands with a political candidate. That's the low-hanging fruit. It's easy to spot. It's designed to be absurd.
It's misinformation.
Yeah.
Outright fabrication.
It is. But that's not what we're digging into today. We're looking at something, I think, much more subtle and honestly much more dangerous intellectually.
So what are we talking about then?
We're talking about how you can take a collection of completely, rigorously true facts. I mean, things that definitely happened, words that were genuinely spoken, data points that are accurate, and you can arrange them.
Like building blocks.
Exactly like building blocks. You arrange them in a very specific way, you leave out a few crucial other blocks, and the structure you build is a complete lie. It's a distortion of reality.
So this isn't about fake facts. It's about a fake narrative built from real facts.
That's it. We are tackling the architecture of information itself. The structure.
And for this deep dive, we're grounding our conversation in a really, really fascinating piece of writing.
We are. It's chapter 12 of a much larger body of work on uncertainty and risk, and the chapter title is, well, it's the title of our discussion today. The facts are true, the news is fake.
And the author's work, for anyone who's not familiar, it deals with concepts like the incerto, which is his whole framework for studying uncertainty, and, of course, the idea of black swans.
Those rare, unpredictable, high-impact events that, shape our world. But this chapter, it's a little different. It's not just theory. It feels a bit like a war memoir.
It's very personal. You can feel the frustration coming off the page.
Oh, yeah. It is absolutely a war story. The author has some, let's just say, some serious battle scars from his encounters with the press and his time in the public eye.
But the mission here, for you listening, isn't just to, rehash old feuds or gossip about who said what.
No. We have a much bigger goal today. We want to pull out the structural lessons from his experience. So first, we're going to get a handle on something called the agency problem in journalism.
Which sounds a bit academic, but trust me, it explains so much about why the news can feel so broken.
It really does. It's a concept from economics that just clicks perfectly. Then we're going to look at the history of how we humans process information, how we deal with rumors, and maybe surprisingly, it turns out we used to have a much healthier, more robust system for this than we do now.
And maybe the most important part of this whole discussion, the big takeaway.
I think so.
We're going to learn how to ethically disagree with someone. Because it feels like, as a society, we've just completely forgotten how to do it.
We have. We've lost the art of the argument. It's all about the gotcha now. So we're going to talk about something called the principle of charity.
Sounds kind of soft, doesn't it? Principle of charity.
It does. It sounds like something you'd learn about in, Sunday school.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's actually a really brutal, intellectually demanding discipline.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So the promise here is that if we do this right, you won't ever look at a newspaper headline or a tweet or even a corporate press release the same way again.
That's the goal.
All right, so let's set this up. We have to start with the central story, the inciting incident that frames this whole chapter. And it doesn't start in a newsroom or online. It starts in a lecture hall.
A very prestigious one. We're in London. It's the summer of 2009. And the venue is the Royal Society for the Arts, the RSA.
For anyone who doesn't know, can you paint a picture? This isn't like a community town hall meeting.
No, absolutely not. This is a very serious room for very serious people to discuss very serious ideas. It's been around for centuries. It has that, old wood paneling, high ceilings kind of feel. It's a place for high-level intellectual discourse.
Okay, so you've got the setting. Now, the players. Who is on stage?
2 people. First, you have the author himself, a specialist, as we said, in probability risk complex systems. He's the expert. And sitting next to him is David Cameron.
David Cameron.
Yeah.
And we need to add the context here because timing is everything. In the summer of 2009, he wasn't prime minister.
Not yet. But he was the leader of the opposition, and he was the heavy, heavy favorite to win the next election. He was the rising star of the Conservative Party. Everybody knew this was very likely the man who was going to be running the United Kingdom very, very soon.
So this is a big deal. You have a future world leader sitting down with a leading philosopher of risk.
A huge deal. And look at the topic. They aren't on stage to talk about, the latest poll numbers or the political scandal of the week.
Not kissing babies.
No. They're on stage for 60 minutes to have a discussion about robustness.
Okay, robustness. That sounds a little vague. We should probably define what they meant by that.
Yeah, in this context, it has a really specific technical meaning. They're not talking about, physical strength. They're talking about how to build systems, economic systems, political systems, social systems that can survive and even thrive in the face of black swans.
So how do you make a country shock-proof?
That's it in a nutshell. How do you make it immune to these massive, unpredictable events that just blow everything up? So they're discussing things like decentralization, managing national debt, accountability in government, how to build things that don't break easily.
Heavy stuff.
Really heavy stuff. The author calls it ce genre de truc, that kind of thing. It's a deep, systemic, 59-minute seminar on complexity.
Fascinating, for sure. But also, probably pretty dense for the average person.
Oh, absolutely. This is the kind of conversation you really have to lean in and pay close attention to. It's all nuance.
So the event wraps up. The 59 minutes are over. The author, he walks off the stage, and he's feeling good.
He's feeling great. You know that feeling when you've had a really good, meaty intellectual conversation, a good sparring match?
Yeah, you feel like you've actually accomplished something.
He felt he'd managed to communicate these really big, bulky, difficult ideas effectively to someone who was about to be in a major position of power. So he leaves the RSA, he's in central London, he heads over to a Chinese restaurant in Soho to meet some friends for dinner.
He's probably relaxing, ordering some dumplings, thinking the hard part of the day is over.
And that's when his phone rings. It was a classic moment in the movie, right? The inciting incident.
And who is it?
It's a friend of his. And the friend isn't calling to say hi. He's in a total panic.
Oh, no.
And he asks the author that question that you never, ever want to hear from a friend. Have you seen the paper?
That's a stomach drop question.
It's the worst. Because in the time it took him to walk from the lecture hall to the restaurant, the story had broken. And suddenly, all across London, every major newspaper, the headlines weren't about robust systems.
I'm guessing they weren't debating the merits of decentralization?
Not even close. The headlines were all screaming the same thing, that the author was a climate denier, and that he was part of some, quote, dark anti-environment conspiracy.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Hold on. I need to stop you there because that's a complete record scratch moment.
It is.
You just spent 5 minutes telling me they had an hour-long, high-level talk about risk management and economic stability.
Yeah.
How on earth do you get climate denier from a lecture on making systems safer? It feels like a total non sequitur.
It feels impossible, right? And that is the paradox we started with. This is where we have to get out the magnifying glass and look at the mechanics of the smear, because here's the critical part.
Okay.
The press didn't technically lie. They didn't make up a quote that he never said.
So the words they printed, he actually spoke them.
Every single one. The words were, on a linguistic level, true.
But the news was fake.
The news is fake. What they did was, it was like a surgical extraction, a really precise piece of journalistic malpractice. They took the 59-minute conversation,
The entire context.
the entire framework, the entire reason for the event, and they just threw it in the trash. They ignored 99% of the discussion.
And they focused on what?
They zeroed in on one single tangential comment, a brief aside that lasted maybe 20 seconds.
20 seconds.
Out of an hour. Less than 1% of the entire event.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
If he said something truly insane in those 20 seconds, wasn't that a fair game? If I give a beautiful hour-long speech on the importance of charity, but in the middle I spend 20 seconds praising a brutal dictator. Well, the 20 seconds is the story, isn't it?
That's a fair point. If the 20 seconds completely undermines or contradicts the other 59 minutes, then yes, absolutely, that's the story.
But that's not what happened here.
That is the opposite of what happened here. And this is the real twist of the knife. They didn't just isolate the comment. They took that comment and reported it in the reverse of its intended meaning.
They flipped it 180 degrees.
Completely inverted it.
How is that even possible? How do you flip the meaning of something while still quoting someone accurately? That sounds That sounds like a kind of dark magic.
It's done by surgically removing the reasoning, the why. And to understand this, we have to get a little bit into the weeds of the author's actual argument about climate, because it's actually pretty brilliant and counterintuitive.
Okay, let's do it.
He was using a framework called the precautionary principle.
Right. We've talked about this before on other deep dives, but let's define it again really clearly for this specific context. What is the precautionary principle?
In the simplest terms, it's a rule for making decisions when you're facing severe, potentially catastrophic uncertainty. It says that if some action or policy has a suspected risk of causing irreversible harm to the public or the environment,
Like, say, pumping carbon into the atmosphere.
a perfect example, then the burden of proof that it is not harmful falls on the people taking that action.
It's not on us to prove it's dangerous. It's on them to prove it's safe.
Exactly. It's the better safe than sorry rule, but with a rigorous mathematical backbone.
Okay, so how does that apply here?
Well, you have to remember the author's background. He wasn't a climate scientist. He was a quantitative trader, a risk analyst. He spent decades watching highly intelligent people with incredibly complex mathematical models get completely wiped out in the financial markets.
He saw firsthand how models can be wrong.
Yeah.
Dangerously wrong.
Right. And his thinking was, okay, in finance, if your risk model is wrong, what happens? You lose a lot of money. Maybe your firm goes bankrupt. You might lose your job. It's bad. But if your climate model is wrong,
You lose the planet.
you lose the entire biosphere. The downside isn't just financial, it's infinite. It's total, irreversible ruin.
There's no bailout for planet Earth.
None. So the author's argument on that stage, in those 20 seconds, was that we don't need to have perfect, complex, error-proof scientific models to justify taking drastic action to start pollution.
So he was saying, I don't even care if the models are 100% accurate.
Exactly. He was saying something like, the risk of ruin is so high, we can't afford to play games with this. We can't wait for perfect certainty. His point was that the very existence of uncertainty should make us more cautious, not less.
That feels like a crucial point. Uncertainty is a reason for more action, not an excuse for inaction.
Precisely. Think of it this way. If you're walking through a dark room and you suspect there might be priceless, fragile Ming vases scattered on the floor, but you're not sure exactly where they are.
Your model of the room is incomplete.
Right. What do? Do you run through the room at full speed?
No, of course not. You slow down, you shuffle your feet, you move inch by inch. The uncertainty forces you to be more conservative.
Yes. Uncertainty compels conservation. He was making the case that the burden of proof isn't on the environmentalists to prove with 100% certainty that the world is going to end. The burden of proof is on the polluters to prove with 100% certainty that there is zero chance of catastrophic tail risk.
So he was making, what sounds like the most aggressive pro-environment, pro-conservation argument you could possibly make.
It is. It's a hyper-conservative stance on risk management applied to the planet. He's saying, stop polluting now, especially because we don't fully understand the consequences.
Okay, so that was the argument. That was the ment. How did that get turned into climate denier?
Because the journalists heard one part of the sentence and then they just stopped listening. They heard him question the models.
Oh.
They heard him say things like, these models are prone to error, these systems are too complex to model perfectly, and they completely ignored the second half of the argument, the therefore we must be extra careful part.
They just reported the first half. Author says climate models are flawed.
Which, to the casual reader, implies.
Author thinks climate change is a hoax.
Exactly. They deliberately confused a skeptical stance on our ability to measure the problem with a skeptical stance on the existence of the problem.
Wow, that is a massive distinction. It's like the difference between saying, I'm not sure exactly how fast this car is going because the speedometer looks a little wonky, and saying, this car isn't moving at all.
That is a perfect analogy. It's a profound misrepresentation. And the irony was just so thick because these were the same newspapers, the same publications that had previously written glowing reviews of his book, The Black Swan.
A book that is entirely about this exact point.
The whole book is about being paranoid about what you don't know and respecting the limits of models. So they were attacking him for applying the very concept that they had previously celebrated him for introducing.
It's just mind-boggling, which leads to the big question. Why? Why do it? Was it just a reporter having a bad day, a single journalist who didn't understand the nuance, or was this something more organized, more malicious?
Well, it's always tempting to attribute to incompetence what might be malice.
The classic Hamlin's razor.
Right. But the author's conclusion after the fact was that it wasn't really about him at all. And it wasn't even fundamentally about the climate.
So who was it about?
It was about David Cameron.
He was just collateral damage?
He was the ammunition. Cameron's the real target. The press, or at least a certain segment of it, wanted to weaken him politically before the election. The narrative they wanted was pre-written.
Let me guess. Cameron, the Tory leader, is palling around with dangerous right-wing nutjobs.
You've got it. Cameron is associating with fringe conspiracy theorists. By smearing the intellectual he was sharing a stage with, by painting him as a climate denier, they could damage Cameron by association. It taints him.
So he realized they would have found anything.
Anything. He says that if it hadn't been the comment on climate models, they would have found something else. They would have criticized his shoes or his tone of voice or a joke that didn't land. The conclusion was already decided. They just needed a fact to hang it on.
They went fishing for a true fact that they could use to tell a fake story.
And that, right there, is the core of this entire deep dive. This isn't just a story about one guy having a bad press day. It's a case study. It's a perfect symptom of a deeply broken structure.
And that structure has a name.
It does. The author calls it the agency problem.
Okay, let's unpack this. The agency problem. This is a big concept from economics and political science, right? It sounds a little dry and academic, but I have a feeling it's going to explain a lot of the frustration we all feel with the modern world.
It is absolutely central to understanding, I think, almost every major dysfunction in our institutions today.
So give us the textbook definition first. What is an agency problem?
In economics, an agency problem happens whenever the interests of the agent, that's the person who is supposed to be doing a job for you, diverge from the interests of the principal. That's you, the person who is paying for or relying on that work.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's use an example. The author uses a really vivid one.
He uses a few, but the one that really sticks is the restaurant owner and the taxi driver. It's brilliant.
Set it up for us.
Okay. Imagine you're in Milan. You've just had a fantastic meal at a wonderful little restaurant. You're the principal. You ask the owner, the proprietor, to call you a taxi to take you back to your hotel.
Seems simple enough.
The owner says, of course. And he calls his cousin, who happens to drive a cab. His cousin is the agent.
Ah, I could already feel the problem starting. A little bit of nepotism.
A little bit. So, your cousin, the taxi driver, picks you up. Now, he has a choice. His interest is to make the biggest fare possible. Your interest, as the customer, is to get to your hotel as quickly and cheaply as possible.
The interests are not aligned.
They're in direct conflict. So what does the cousin do? Does he take the most direct route? Or does he take you on the scenic route? A long, winding tour all over the city, running up the meter before finally dropping you off.
If he's acting in his own self-interest, he takes the long route. He cads the bill.
Of course he does. His loyalty isn't to you, the customer. It's to his own wallet. And maybe to his cousin, the restaurant owner, who might be getting a little kickback. That gap between what's good for you and what's good for him, that is the agency problem.
Yeah, okay, that's crystal clear. Now map that onto journalism.
In this analogy, we, the readers, the public, we are the customer in Milan. We are the principal. Our interest is simple. We want the truth. We want to understand what's happening in the world. We want to get to the destination, which is accurate information, as directly and efficiently as possible.
And the journalist.
The journalist is the cousin in the taxi.
Ouch.
It's a brutal analogy, but the author argues it's accurate. The modern journalist, particularly in the system he's describing, is not acting as a simple intermediary. They are not trying to get you to the truth. They are taking you for a ride. They are inflating the meter.
How does a journalist inflate the meter? What's the currency?
The currency is clicks. It's outrage. It's career advancement. It's serving a political agenda. They inflate the meter by manufacturing controversy, by creating a simple good guys versus bad guys narrative where none exists, by getting praised by their peers in the industry. They're filtering the information to serve their interests, not yours.
He also uses a medical analogy, which I have to say I found even more chilling.
The doctor. Yeah, that one's rough.
Talk us through that one.
It's the doctor who misdiagnoses you on purpose. Or let's say they prescribe you a specific drug, not because it's the best one to cure your illness, but because they own stock in the pharmaceutical company that makes it. Or because that company gives them kickbacks for every prescription they write.
That's terrifying because it's a fundamental violation of trust. You go to a doctor assuming, I mean, it's a sacred trust, that they are on your team, that their only goal is your health.
And we used to have that same assumption about journalists. We assumed their only goal was our enlightenment. The author's point is that the structure of the industry has broken that trust. The agent's interests have diverged from the principles.
And he calls this a structural defect. That's a key phrase.
It is, because he says his anger, his frustration, wasn't just about the personal insult of being misquoted. He was angry because the public was fundamentally defrauded. They were robbed of the actual substance of that 1-hour talk.
The real conversation just vanished.
It was erased from history. The nuanced discussion about robustness, about systemic risk, about decentralization, poof, gone. The public was sold a cheap fake story about a climate denial controversy, and the real value, the real information, was destroyed in the process.
It's not just misinformation, it's information destruction. It's like a librarian burning the books to sell a scandalous headline about the fire.
That's a great way to put it. And this leads him to a very dark conclusion, a prediction. He says, and this is almost a direct quote, "You never cure structural defects. The system eventually corrects itself by collapsing."
That sounds pretty ominous. But okay, before we get to the potential collapse, I want to push back on this a little. Why are the incentives so broken? I mean, a good restaurant owner wants happy customers, so they'll come back and write good reviews. Shouldn't a newspaper want happy, well-informed readers so they'll keep subscribing? If you keep lying to your customers, won't they just eventually leave?
Logically, you would think so. That's how a healthy market should work. But this is where the author brings in another one of his core concepts.
Skin in the game.
Skin in the game. He argues that in the current system, journalists don't actually have that much skin in the game when it comes to the opinion of the average reader.
Who do they care about then?
They care about the opinions of other journalists.
So it's an inside game, a peer group thing.
It's a status hierarchy within a monoculture. If you're a journalist at a major publication, your career advancement, your prestige, your book deals, your invitations to speak on TV, all of that comes from your peers. Your status is determined by whether you got the big scoop, whether you successfully nailed a political target, whether you framed the narrative in the way that is currently fashionable within the newsroom culture.
And if you break from that culture,
If you step out of line, if you're the one person who says, hang on, I was in the room and that's not what he meant, you're not a hero. You're a traitor. You're ostracized.
it sounds like the high school cafeteria. If you don't sit at the cool kids' table and agree with them, you're a social outcast.
It's exactly that dynamic. And he adds another layer to it. Economic vulnerability.
Right? Most journalists are not, rolling in money.
No, it's a notoriously difficult industry. He makes the point that the profession is deeply insecure. Many journalists, he says, live hand to mouth. They don't have what he calls FU money. They can't afford to get fired or blacklisted by their peers. For them, ostracism is a career death sentence.
So that financial insecurity makes them more conformist, more likely to go along with the group.
It incentivizes what he calls Me Tooism. In a healthy, competitive field like business or science, if you just copy what everyone else is doing, you usually fail. You have to be different, to innovate, to find an edge.
But in journalism, he's saying the opposite is true.
He's saying that in this broken system, if you copy everyone else, if you write the exact same take on Brexit or the Syrian war or GMOs as every other major outlet, you're rewarded, you're safe, you're part of the herd, and the herd protects you.
Okay, so let's summarize this. We have a system where the agent, the journalist, is financially insecure and primarily incentivized to distort information to please their peers and maintain their status within a monoculture. And this is done at the direct expense of the principal, the reader, who just wants to know what's actually going on.
You've nailed it.
That explains an astonishing amount about the media landscape of the last decade or two. It explains why every headline on a major event seems to sound exactly the same.
It does. It's a grim diagnosis. But the author doesn't just leave us there in the depression of the current state of affairs. He does what he always does. He zooms out.
Way out.
Way, way out. He looks at the entire history of human information flow to make a really provocative point. This top-down broadcast model of news that we grew up with. It's not normal. It's a historical aberration.
This is where we get into Lindy. We love the Lindy effect on this show. It's one of our favorite mental models.
It's one of the best. And just as a quick refresher for anyone who hasn't heard of it, the Lindy effect is an idea about longevity. It says that for non-perishable things like ideas, technologies, books, cultural practices, the longer something has been around, the longer its future life expectancy is.
So old is gold. A book that's been in print for 2,000 years, like the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, has probably tapped into something fundamental about the human condition. And it's a good bet it'll be around for another 2,000 years.
Right. Whereas a pop psychology bestseller that came out last Tuesday, well, the odds are it'll be forgotten by next year.
So how does Lindy apply to the news?
The author's argument is that the mid-20th century model of news, the Walter Cronkite era, the voice of God news anchor, the monolithic newspaper of record like the New York Times, that whole system is not Lindy-compatible.
It's not old, it's a new invention.
It's a blip, a weird 50 or 60-year experimental phase in the multi-thousand-year history of human communication. He argues that the natural Lindy-proof state of human information is a two-way flow. It's a conversation.
It's the marketplace, the town square.
Exactly. The souk, the Roman Forum. He takes us back to the ancient Mediterranean. Picture a bustling market in ancient Rome or Antioch. There was no BBC, there was no single source of truth. News traveled organically, by word of mouth.
And he singles out the barbers. I love this little historical detail.
Our barbers were the original information hub. They were the internet of the ancient world. You'd go into the barber shop for a shave and maybe to have a tooth pulled, because they did that too.
A multi-service platform?
Right, and you'd get all the news. The barber was the central node in the network. He heard stories from the merchant who just got back from Egypt, the soldier on leave from the frontier, the senator's aide. He heard everything.
But here's the crucial difference between that system and the 20th century one.
In that system, you were the filter.
Unpack that. What does it mean for me to be the filter?
It means that in a small, face-to-face community like a village or a market, reputation is everything. It's physical, it's tangible. If the known town liar comes running into the square screaming, "The Persian army is coming over the hill,"
Right.
what happens?
Nobody panics. You just think, oh, that's just Philip. He's always saying stuff like that.
Exactly. You know his face. You know his track record. As the author says, unreliable people carried less weight. Trust was a currency that had to be earned day in and day out. He quotes an old saying, "You can't fool people more than twice."
So there was an immediate feedback mechanism. If you spread fake news in the souk, you'd get called out on it right there. You'd lose your social standing. You might even, get punched in the nose.
There were consequences, skin in the game. And he gives this beautiful personal example from his own life, the social grandmother.
This is such a great story. It really illustrates the concept perfectly.
It does. His grandmother was part of the Greek Orthodox community in Beirut, and her newsfeed, her source of information, wasn't a screen or a newspaper. It was condolence visits.
Condolence visits. That sounds like a pretty morbid way to get your news.
To our modern ears, maybe. But he explains that in that culture, paying respects when someone passed away was a central social obligation. It was the fabric that held the community together. So his grandmother would go from house to house, drink coffee, offer sympathies, and just talk.
And through this network of conversations.
She knew everything. The book says practically every affair in town was detected.
And not just the big stuff.
No, down to the most minute details. If the child of a prominent family was failing their exams at school, she knew. If a business partnership was about to go sour, she knew. If a marriage was secretly on the rocks, she knew about it before anyone else.
And it was a self-correcting system.
Completely. Because the network was so tight-knit and everyone knew everyone else, it was almost impossible to sustain a lie. If you tried to spread a malicious rumor through the grandmother network, you'd be found out and your reputation would be ruined. The error correction was instant and it was ruthless.
So that's the natural state, according to Lindy. Decentralized, reputation-based, two-way. Everyone is a publisher, everyone is a consumer, and everyone is a fact-checker.
Yes. And then for this brief, weird period, let's say from the rise of network television in the 1950s until about, 2016 or so, we entered the era of the mandarins.
The five priests of information.
The era where a very small, elite group of editors in New York and TV anchors in their studios controlled the microphone. It was a one-way street, a lecture. You couldn't talk back to Walter Cronkite. You couldn't write a correction in the margins of the newspaper that would be seen by millions instantly.
It was a monopoly on the narrative.
A total monopoly. And the author makes a very controversial argument here. He says the U.S. election of 2016 wasn't just a political event. It was the moment that structural monopoly collapsed.
So he sees the rise of social media not as the problem, but as the solution, or at least the correction.
That's his take. He sees it as the moment Lindy struck back. Social media, for all of its undeniable chaos and toxicity, fundamentally returned us to the souk. It broke the one-way lecture and restored the two-way conversation.
That is a very different perspective from what you usually hear. The common narrative is that social media created the fake news problem and is destroying society.
I know, the common view is, look at this mess. It's a cesspool of lies and polarization. But the author is looking at the underlying structure. He's saying structurally, this is a return to our natural format. Yes, it's incredibly noisy. Yes, the village idiots have a megaphone now. But just like in the ancient market, over the long run, sources that are consistently reliable tend to build a following and a reputation, and sources that are consistently fraudulent get exposed and lose credibility.
It's messy and chaotic, but it breaks the monopoly of the cousin in the taxi.
It does. The old system had what he calls the Bob Rubin trade. That's a finance term for a strategy that makes small, steady profits for a very long time and then one day blows up and loses everything in an instant.
So the mainstream press had a profitable monopoly on truth for decades.
But the divergence, the gap between their interests and the public's interest, just got too wide, the tension built up, and then the whole thing snapped.
Okay, so the monopoly is broken. We're back in the souk. We're all scrolling through what is now X. We're reading Substacks. We're listening to deep dive discussions like this one. The responsibility for filtering information is back on our shoulders.
It is. Which brings us to what you call the hardest part. If we are now the filters, how do we do it? How do we navigate this chaotic marketplace of ideas? How do we handle disagreement?
This is a section on the ethics of disagreement, and I agree with you. This should be taught in every school. It's that fundamental.
It really is. The author starts by drawing a very sharp, very important line between two different ways you can criticize someone.
Okay, what are they?
On the one hand, you can criticize what a person said. You can focus on the specific words they used, the syntax, a clumsy turn of phrase, a slip of the tongue.
And on the other hand,
you can criticize what a person meant. You can engage with their actual argument, the concept they were trying to convey, their overall intent.
the what versus the meant.
Exactly. And attacking the what is the easy way out. It's the low road. It's the gotcha. It's finding that one 20-second clip where someone's phrasing was a bit awkward and then pretending that invalidates their entire life's work.
It's precisely what happened to the author after the RSA talk.
It is the dictionary definition of it. And he calls this tactic the mark of a charlatan.
He does, and he gives another example, the author and podcaster Sam Harris. He's not attacking Harris personally, but using him as an example of a certain style of debate.
Right. He critiques Harris for a tendency to defend his own positions or attack his critics by zooming in with a microscope on a single sentence, by saying, look at the exact words I used here. I didn't say X, I said Y, rather than engaging with the broader spirit of the critique against his worldview.
It's a very legalistic approach to debate. I am technically correct based on the specific phrasing.
Yes, but communication in the real world isn't about legalistic precision. It's about conveying meaning and intent. And this brings him to this really chilling quote, which has been attributed to a few powerful figures over the centuries: Cardinal Richelieu, Voltaire, Talleyrand.
It's one of those quotes that's so true, everyone wants to claim it.
It is, and the quote is, give me a few lines written by any man, and I will find enough in them to get him hung.
Wow. That's frightening because it feels absolutely true. It implies that no one is safe from this kind of attack.
No one. It's a statement about the nature of language itself. It is functionally impossible for any human being to speak or write at length without producing a sentence that, if ripped from its context and twisted with malicious intent, could be used to destroy their reputation.
If I recorded you for 24 hours straight, I'm sure I could edit together a 30-second clip that would make you sound like a monster.
Without a doubt. And I could do the same to you. And this is where he brings up Donald Trump, which is, a very charged example.
It is. And he's very careful to say he's not endorsing the politics. He's pointing out a parallel in the mechanism of the attacks.
Right. Trump's famous line, the one we started with, the facts are true, the news is fake, was him expressing this exact same frustration. He felt, rightly or wrongly, that the press was constantly using this Richelieu method against him. They weren't engaging with his broader platform or what he meant. They were just hunting for the individual lines they could use to hang him.
Okay, so if that's the charlatan way, the selective extraction, the theft of context, what's the right way? What's the master way to disagree?
He gives us three incredible role models from intellectual history: Karl Popper, Friedrich Hayek, and the heavyweight champion Thomas Aquinas.
All right, let's break them down one by one. Karl Popper.
Popper was a giant, a 20th century philosopher of science, and his method of debate was just extraordinary. When he was going to argue against your position, he wouldn't start by attacking its weakest point. He would start by making your argument stronger.
He would steelman your argument, not strawman it?
He would state your position back to you, but better than you would stated it yourself. He would find the most charitable, most rational, most powerful version of your argument. He essentially say, if I understand you correctly, your best and most compelling case is X, Y, and Z.
And only after he'd built you that beautiful steel fortress.
Only then would he proceed to dismantle it brick by brick.
That is just an incredible intellectual flex. It's pure confidence. It says, I'm so sure I'm right that I'm going to beat your argument at its absolute best, not at its worst.
Exactly. It demonstrates that your goal isn't just to win the fight. Your goal is to get to the truth. Okay, next up, Friedrich Hayek.
The economist.
The great economist. He famously wrote a book called Contra Keynes in Cambridge, which was a sustained attack on the economic theories of John Maynard Keynes. Now, Keynes was a notoriously aggressive and intimidating debater. People were afraid of him. But the author points out that in Hayek's critique, he never once misrepresented a single line of Keynes's work. He attacked the ideas, the logic, the conclusions. He never went after a slip of the tongue or a poorly phrased sentence.
He engaged with what Keynes meant.
He did. And that brings us to the final role model, the oldest and maybe the most profound, Aquinas.
St. Thomas Aquinas. We're going back 800 years now.
8 centuries. To his masterwork, the Summa Theologica, Aquinas basically formalized this ethical method of disagreement. He created a structure for it. Each section of his work follows a rigid pattern.
What's the pattern?
He begins with the question he's trying to answer, but then before he gives his own answer, he lists the objections.
The objections to his own position.
Yes. He would meticulously and fairly list all the strongest arguments against the view he was about to defend. He had to fully inhabit the mind of his opponent, to understand their view from the inside before he was allowed to proceed. Then he'd present the counter-argument, the sed contra, and only then would he offer his own resolution.
He had to earn the right to disagree by first demonstrating perfect understanding.
And this method, the author notes, has deep roots. It goes all the way back to the reasoning of the Talmud and to Roman legal practice. You must be able to argue your opponent's case before you can argue your own.
Which leads us to the final unifying concept, the one that ties this all together.
The principle of charity.
This is the antidote. It's the cure for the agency problem and the charlatan's method.
And the author uses incredibly strong language to describe its opposite. He says, quote, a straw man is no different from theft. Now, why theft? That sounds extreme.
Why does he equate it to theft?
Because when you deliberately misrepresent someone's argument to make it easier to attack, when you build a straw man, you are stealing something valuable. You are stealing their credibility. You are stealing the integrity of the entire conversation. You are robbing the audience of the chance to engage with the real argument. You are counterfeiting their position.
And in those old Lindy-proof high-trust societies we talked about, the souk, the grandmother network, that kind of intellectual theft was punished.
Severely. He brings up Babylonian law, the Code of Hammurabi. This is Old Testament eye for an eye stuff. Under that code, if you made a false accusation against another person, the punishment was simple. You received the exact penalty for the crime you falsely accused them of.
Wow. So if the penalty for murder is death, and I falsely accuse you of murder,
the state executes you.
That would certainly put some serious skin in the game into spreading rumors.
It would clean up the public square in a hurry, wouldn't it? But the underlying point is that ancient societies intuitively understood that trust is the foundation of everything. And if you allow people to pollute the well of public information with slander and misrepresentation, you destroy the community. So they just didn't tolerate it.
Okay, so let's get the formal definition on the table. What is the principle of charity?
It's a simple stipulation. It says you must interpret a speaker's statements in the most rational, favorable, and intelligent way possible. When their words are ambiguous, you should assume they meant the smart thing, not the dumb thing. You treat their argument as you would want your own argument to be treated.
It's the golden rule, but for rhetoric. Argue unto others as you would have them argue unto you.
That's a perfect way to put it. But here's the final fascinating little twist that the author leaves us with. He points out that in the formal discipline of philosophy, the actual term principle of charity is surprisingly recent. It's only about 60 or 70 years old.
That's very recent. That's within living memory for a lot of people.
It is. And he asks a brilliant question. Why did we suddenly need to give it a name in the mid-20th century? His conclusion is powerful.
What is it?
We only had to formalize it as an explicit rule because we had lost the natural implicit instinct for it.
We forgot how to be decent to each other in arguments, so we had to write it down in a textbook.
That's exactly it. In the ancient decentralized world, Lindy and reputation took care of it. If you were consistently uncharitable, the village just tuned you out. You became invisible. But in the modern mediated world, the world of one-way communication and the agency problem being uncharitable became a winning strategy. It was a way to get clicks, to sell newspapers, to destroy your political opponents. The incentives flipped. So philosophy had to step in and say, wait, hang on, stop. We need a formal rule for this because we've lost our way.
So where does all this leave us, the listener, the person trying to make sense of the world in 2026?
I think it leaves us with a choice and a responsibility. The structural defect of the old media is collapsing, which is good, but the new world that's replacing it is chaotic and noisy.
And in this new world, we can choose to act like the cousin in the taxi, always looking for the angle, the gotcha moment, the opportunity to dunk on someone by twisting their words.
Or we can choose to be like Aquinas. We can choose to take the harder, more disciplined path.
We can take the extra 30 seconds to try and understand what people mean, not just what their isolated words say.
We can apply the principle of charity in our own lives, online and off. We can check the facts ourselves before we share the news that confirms our biases.
It shifts the burden of responsibility almost entirely, from the producer of the news to the consumer.
It does. There's no passive consumption of information anymore. That era is over. You can no longer just trust the headline. You have to be an active filter. You have to constantly ask yourself that question we started with. Am I getting the facts or am I getting the news?
The facts are true, the news is fake.
Once you understand the mechanism, you really can't unsee it. It's everywhere.
That seems like a perfect place to land this. It's a heavy responsibility for all of us, but I think it's also empowering.
I agree. Thanks for digging into this with me.
Always a pleasure. And for you, listening, let's leave you with a final thought to chew on. We've talked about the golden rule of rhetoric, but maybe we need a silver rule for our modern intellectual debates. If we now live in a world where anyone, at any time, can be hung by a few lines of text taken out of context, does the primary responsibility for truth shift entirely from the writer to the reader? Is it now your job, your fundamental duty as a citizen, to reconstruct the whole conversation from the tiny biased fragments you're being fed every day?
That's a big question.
It is. We'll see you on the deep dive. Keep thinking.